proposal to reduce ethanol mandates to about 13 billion gallons seems to be predicated on two beliefs. The first is that consumers will not consume more ethanol than contained in E10, or 10% blend. The second is that if EPA tries to force production beyond that 13 billion gallons, then retail fuel prices will increase. I really think that's lies at the heart of why the White House has pressured the EPA to reduce the mandates. Both of these beliefs have been reinforced by an extensive lobbying campaign by the oil industry, trade groups, and executives. In a series of research papers, my colleague Sebastian Pouliot and I have examined whether there is an economic basis for these beliefs. We wrote these papers in an attempt to move the RFS debate beyond the narrow economic interests of the impacted parties to a debate about the benefits and costs of replacing fossil fuels with renewable fuels. I want to share a few relevant findings of our research. Our first finding is that E85 is not a failed fuel as claimed by ethanol opponents. Consumption of E85 has been limited because its price has rarely been set at levels where it makes sense to use the fuel. EPA does not have to reduce mandates because consumers won't consume more ethanol. The owners of the 16 million flex fuel vehicles in the United States will fill up with the 85 if it's priced right. And it will be priced right if EPA allows the RFS to continue as planned. We estimate that up to 800 million gallons of ethanol can be consumed in E85 with the existing vehicle fleet and the existing stations if E85 were priced to save drivers a bit of money. This level of consumption beyond E10 combined with banked RINs could meet a 14.4 billion gallon ethanol target, which is where the RFS would be without EPA's proposed reduction. Far higher levels of consumption would be immediately feasible with low-cost investments in new blender pumps and E85 stations, as long as they're located where the flex fuel vehicles are located. The belief that there is no market for ethanol beyond E10 is simply wrong. EPA's proposed rule would reduce mandated volumes of biofuel, in part because of, quote, supply concerns associated with the blend wall. Our research demonstrates that the important supply concern associated with the blend wall pertains to the supply of stations that sell E85 and E15, not the supply of the biofuel. The lack of stations that sell the fuel results in a lack of demand, not a lack of supply. EPA's justification for reducing ethanol mandates implies that mandates won't be increased until investments in retail outlets increase sufficiently. But EPA has the causality backwards. The number of stations that sell higher ethanol blends won't increase until EPA sets ethanol mandates beyond E10 levels. If increased mandates need to wait for the stations to be built, mandates will never increase. If EPA's proposed rule is finalized, I believe that it would send a strong signal to not produce any more flex vehicles, halt all new investments in fueling infrastructure, and halt new investments in production of second-generation biofuels. The oil industry has been consistent in their claim that their cost of complying with higher ethanol requirements would force them to pass these costs on to consumers, either directly through higher pump prices or indirectly through a sharp reduction in the supply of gasoline and diesel that they sell to us. Professor Pouliot and I have demonstrated that the threat of a sharp reduction in fuel supplies to U.S. consumers would run counter to the self-interest of oil companies themselves and could only be carried out if the oil companies formed an illegal cartel. I don't think they're going to do that. In our most recent study, we did find support for the argument that the oil company cost of complying with ethanol mandates would result in a bit higher wholesale gasoline prices. Each gallon of gasoline that an oil company produces increases that company's renewable fuel obligation. That's how the RFS is supposed to work. The cost of this obligation, we calculate, is the RIN price that you see out in the market by Des Moines Company RIN engineers and other people, and it's multiplied by the EPA's blending percentage. So if you had an 11% blending percentage and a $1 RIN price, the cost increase to oil companies would be 11 cents per gallon. We estimate that maybe about 8 cents of this cost would find its way into higher wholesale gasoline prices. But this does not mean that the fuel price paid by consumers would go up by this 8 cents. Today, consumers don't consume pure gasoline. They consume mostly 10% ethanol, 90% gasoline. So in fact, after you take into account the same economic force that the RIN price affects wholesale gasoline prices will actually reduce ethanol prices by more than the wholesale gasoline price increases. So we actually find that if the EPA decides to reverse its decision and increase mandates to where they were originally with the RFS, that E10 prices would actually decline by a small amount. So there might be reasons why Congress might want to revisit the RFS, but a lack of consumer demand for ethanol beyond E10 or a concern about higher prices at the pump are simply no justification for this. And it does seem to me that those are the two justifications that EPA has given. Thank you.